I'm going to show you step by step how to separate a 5-color job in Photoshop. Coming up. How do you work this thing? Before we begin this tutorial, I'm going to let you know that I left a link down in the description as to where you can get Adobe Photoshop or Illustrator. And if you use our link, what it will do is kick a little bit of a commission our way, so that way we can continue to make videos such as these for you. And it's not going to cost you any more than if you were just to go over to adobe.com yourself. So let's go ahead and dive into this tutorial. Alright, so here is the piece of art that we are working with. It's going to go on a royal blue shirt. You can see here that we do have our yellow, red, we have what looks like a navy blue, we have a white, and then we're going to do an underbase as well, which gives us 5 colors. So this is how I'm going to go about separating this. I'm going to show 2 separate examples of how I would go about separating this. One of those examples, basically creating layers, that way you can turn them on and off and then print straight out of Photoshop. And then the other method will be saving a PSD or a DCS 2.0 file, so that way you can just bring it into Illustrator, because Illustrator does have that much better of PostScript printing, I would say. Is probably the best way to explain it. So let's go ahead and start with an image size. You can hit Command Option I or Control for you guys out there on a PC and gals. Now this artwork is 100% to print size at 300 DPI, so that's where you need to be starting at. If you have anything lower, I'd say anything lower than 200 DPI, then you might have to have your client redo the art, or you need to consider when creating your artwork to make sure it's at 300 DPI at the full print size. Let's go ahead and start with the lightest color, and that is the white. So let's go to color range, and I'm going to select the white here, and I'm just going to pull this up to about 100 right here in the fuzziness, and I'm going to hit OK. And you can see it gave us pretty close to 1 pixel away from what is actually our white. So now at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer. You can either hit the button here, or you can hit Command Shift and N, and we'll call this white. And I'm going to hit OK. Now I'm going to hit D on the keyboard, which will give us our default colors on our palette here. And I'm going to hold Option and Delete, because this is my foreground color. If I were to hold Command Delete, it would fill it with white. So I'm going to hold Option and hit Delete. Now that's going to fill that with black. And this is for the sake of doing films, right? I'm going to hit Command D to deselect. And I'm just going to turn that layer off. I'm going to go back to my original art layer. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to select this yellow here. Select Color Range. We're going to take our clicker here and click within yellow. Again, we're at a little over 100. And if you zoom in, you can see that we got most of the yellow. We could probably boost this one just a little more. So I'm going to hit Command D. I'm going to go to Select, Color Range, and then in this case, I'm going to change grayscale. There's different modes here that will kind of help you see what it is you're selecting exactly. So if we did the white mask and we really boosted this up, you can see that it's starting to grab some of these darker pixels, which we don't really want. So I'm going to roll this back. Let's do about 122 and see what that gets us. It grabs some more of the pixels. I don't want to go too extreme with it, but this will work just fine for creating our yellow. As you guys can see, we do have a little bit of white here, and we don't want to spread that out too far. So now I'm going to make a new layer, and we're going to call this yellow. And then we're going to hit D on our keyboard again, get our black back, hold Option and hit Delete. Then we filled that with black. Now we can turn that off. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to select our red. Same process, select, Color Range, and then we're going to select our red. I'm just going to go ahead and put this back to none, so that way I can see what I'm actually selecting here. I'm going to hit OK. Now that we have our red selected, it does look like we can fill this in a little bit. We're missing a little bit of information, so I'm going to hit Command D and deselect that, go back to Select, Color Range once more, and I'm going to select the red, and then I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to try and grab some more of this with my plus eyedropper. I'm just going to click some of these colors here, and that will help grab some of those areas. However, you can see now here in this part where we're actually grabbing some of the blue from that kind of navy color, and we don't want that. So let's back this up a little bit. I'm just hitting Command negative on the keyboard just to quickly zoom out, and you can see I selected some of this, so I'm going to pull the fuzziness back a little bit just until it fades away. We're good there. So now if we zoom in, you can see we still have these pixels. We grabbed those pixels, but we're also not grabbing anything else that we do not want to print any red onto our piece of art. I'm going to hold Command Shift and N, give us our new layer. We'll call this red. Once again, D on the keyboard. We're going to hold Option and hit Delete. Command D just to deselect that. Now we have our red ready to go. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to select this navy color. We're going to go to select color range. You can see how much of the blue it is actually selecting here, which we do not want. So I'm going to pull the fuzziness back a little bit until we are no longer grabbing these little, what is kind of not only the color of the shirt, but also there's these texture in here to kind of give it a little bit of a distressed look. So I'm going to pull that back until those disappear, and then I'm going to hit OK. Now you can see that we have quite a bit of this selected. There are some of these darker parts here, but when it comes to a dark color such as this, how I would print it is we're not going to back it up with the white base. Because the color is darker than the shirt, we're just going to print that directly onto the shirt. These darker inks tend to kind of bleed out just a little bit or spread out. I'm perfectly happy with how the selection is. So I'm going to hit Command Shift and N, and we'll just call this navy, and we'll hit OK. D on the keyboard, Option and Delete to fill that with black. Command D to deselect. And so now we have our navy. Now we have our four top colors, our four visual colors that you can see. The next thing we need to do is actually grab our white base, and how you have to excuse me, how we're going to go about doing that is I'm going to go back to my original layer, and I'm going to select this blue here, and then let everything else that isn't that blue end up being how we create our white base. So I'm going to go to select color range, and then I'm going to select this blue here. We do want to grab some of this as well, so I'm going to grab my plus on the little eyedropper and select that as well. The fuzziness we may turn up just a little bit, but we got to be careful. As you can see here, we are starting to grab some of that navy, and we don't want to grab any of that navy, so we're going to drag the fuzziness back. And for the sake of this demonstration, I'm actually going to grab a little bit of this just to show you how, just in case you do end up grabbing some color that you don't want, so that way you're not printing in these areas. I'll show you how to get rid of that, and I'm going to just go ahead and hit OK. We're going to make a new layer. We'll call this white base. D on the keyboard to get my default colors back. Option and Delete. I apologize. Let me back up there for a second. Let me hit undo. I'm going to hold Command Shift and I to inverse that. And now we're going to do our Option Delete. Okay, so now we have our white base created, although we don't want to back up that navy. So I'm going to turn this layer off here. And what we're going to do is go to our navy. We're going to hold Command or Control for you PC users out there. Just hold down the Control or Command button and then click on the navy. That will bring up our navy selection. And now we can come in here and we can go to our white base, and we can just hit Delete on the keyboard, and now that is gone from our selection. Okay, so now we're looking pretty good. We have our white base, we have our navy, we got a red. Our image has all the colors that we need, and if you turn all of them on along with your artwork, you can see you shouldn't be able to see any kind of separation between any of these colors here. Now the next thing which a lot of you will have questions about this, as is choking your underbase or doing a spread. In this situation, there's a couple ways that I could go about doing this.
Shut up!
In this situation, there's a couple ways I could go about doing this. I can either choke the base or spread out our top colors. And looking in here, and it all kind of comes down to preference, really, and what color shirt you're printing on, how opaque your inks are. So if we were to spread this out and we're using some really opaque inks, then you will be able to see that little bit of a spread, and we'll close up some of these areas. Just a touch, just a pixel, right? So, which isn't too big of a deal. So let's go ahead and do it in that particular situation. What we're going to do is we're going to leave our white base as it is, and with our yellow and our red, we're going to spread those two colors. Our white top, we necessarily don't need to spread, because even sometimes with the white top, I'll actually choke it back by a pixel just to accommodate a little bit for just some of the wiggle room that presses tend to have. You know, they're not precise. Some of them are pretty spot on, but none of them actually are, and your shirt does tend to shrink a little bit when you flash it. So this will help with those kinds of situations. I'm going to turn my white off. I'm going to go over to my red. We'll turn our red on. I'm going to hold Command down, click on the little thumbnail here, and then we're just going to go to Select, Modify, and Expand. And we're just going to expand that by 1 pixel, and that will give us our little bit of a spread here. So that way we can make sure that there's no white that's going to show up around our red. So now I'm going to go back to my red layer, hold Option and hit Delete, and then hit Command D to deselect that. Now you can see that this did protrude a little bit into the white, and I'll show you how to go about knocking that out, but we'll do that once we do the yellow as well. So I'm going to turn my red off and then go over to my yellow. I'll turn that on as well, and then I'm going to hold Command, click over the little thumbnail here. We're going to go to Modify, Expand, and we're going to expand it by 1 pixel. And then we're going to hit Option and Delete, and then Command and D to deselect that. So now we have our spread on our yellow as well. If you're having a little bit harder of a time with your registration, your press is kind of loose, you can do it by 2 pixels, but at that point it tends to get, it's a little much at that point. I think 1 pixel is pretty good, works out pretty well. Okay, now back to our situation with our white. So for our white top here, we're going to hold Command, select that, and you can see how the red is kind of protruding into it just a little bit. Geez, can't talk today, I apologize. So now we're going to go to our red, and we have our selection from our white, and we're just going to hit Delete, and that will get rid of any of the red that will want to go inside of our white. And we're going to go over to our yellow as well, and we'll do the same thing, because we have a little bit of that yellow coming in here, and we'll hit Delete, and then we'll hit Command D and deselect it. So now at this point we could just go ahead and save this. We'll save it as a PSD, and I'm just going to put it on my desktop. We're going to include our layers, and we are going to save that. Now at this point, you can just make sure you're not going to save over your file. You can go to Image, and you can just duplicate the file and hit OK. We'll get rid of this layer here, and then we'll go to Image, Mode, and Grayscale, and we'll click Don't Merge. By the way, I've been separating this the whole time in RGB. I don't know if I've brought that up just yet. So now we're going to go through and we're going to look at each of our colors, and we're going to just make sure, like say for instance we got all these little white lines, which is fine because that's a little white outline, so we're good there. However, we do want to go over to our info palette, so I'm going to go to Window and Info, and we just want to make sure that it's saying 100% black here. So we're good on that front. and we're going to go over to our yellow, make sure nothing is there that's kind of a grayscale. You can even create a new layer and then bring that down to the bottom, and we'll just fill that with white, and that will help us visually to see if there is anything grayscale that shouldn't be there. So now we're going to go down to our red, and you can see here where there actually is just a little bit of there's like a 1% and then 3% dot there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this white layer here, and we are going to duplicate that, and we're going to put it underneath our red layer. We're going to select our red layer, and we're going to hit Command E just to merge those, and we can rename this red all over again. Now that should allow us to take our layers, or excuse me, our levels, and to be able to just completely eliminate that. So now that is all taken care of. Again, let me do that one more time, and you guys can see where there's a little bit of gray in there. Just hit Command L, our little white selector here, and find one of the darkest spots that shouldn't be there, and just click it and hit OK. And now we are good to go with our red. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to go over to our navy, and everything looks fine here. There's a little bit of garbage here, so let's go ahead and do the same thing. We'll just duplicate our white layer, and then we'll merge the navy down into that white layer. We'll hit Command L, take our white selector here, and then we'll select that and get rid of some of this garbage that's floating around. And so now we should just have a nice clean navy layer that's going to print. I know zoomed in it looks pretty sharp, but if you double click on your zoom glass, that gives you 100%, and it will show you what your art looks like, and that looks pretty clean for some screen printing, I'd say. And then the next thing we're going to do is take a look at our white base. We're just going to make sure it's 100% black, and it is. And so now at this point you're ready to just go ahead, and if you have your presets ready to go, you can just hit Command P and print it straight from Photoshop. Now the next example I am going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and close this file out. I'm not going to save that. We're going to go back to this file here, and instead of having made all these layers, how I would have gone about doing this is actually creating channels. So let's just go ahead and let's start over from scratch. We'll remove everything, and we'll kind of quickly go through this. We'll start with our white. We'll go to select and color range, and we're going to select our white here, and let's do let's see, because we are selecting white, we're really not being able to see that with our white quick mask, and we're going to make this about 100, and we're going to hit OK, and then we're going to go over to our channels, and we're going to click this mask channel right here. So we're going to hit that. It's going to create a new channel here. We'll select that, hit Command D to deselect it, and then we are going to inverse it, because we want what is black. That's going to tell our software, which we're going to import into Adobe Illustrator, and it's basically going to tell us that or tell the software that that's what's going to print. Okay, so now we have our white top. This is going to be print color number 5. So we might want to do the order backwards. Let's actually go ahead and do our white base. We'll go to select color range. We'll select the blue, and we'll let it select that, and we'll just remove it like we did in our earlier example. So I'm going to hit OK. So now we have our white base. I'm going to go over and make a new mask layer, and we are going to deselect that because we were selecting the blue. It's pretty much inverted as it is already. And then what's here in the blue, I'll actually show you what's in this navy here. I'll show you a cool trick real quick. We'll hit Command L, and then we'll do our white selector, and then we'll select that, and now that navy is gone. So now we're going to name this number 1. We'll call it white base, and we're going to move this above the white top. We're going to go back to RGB, and then the next color we would print would be this red, because it is one of the smaller colors, and if you print this wet on wet, you want to start with your smaller colors. Actually, in this case, how I would go about doing it, we would do the red third and we'll do the navy second. So let's go ahead and do the navy. We'll select color range, grab that navy, back this up so we're not grabbing that blue. We'll pull it back until all that blue is gone. And we'll hit OK. And now we'll create a new channel here. Hit Command D to deselect that, and hit Command I to inverse it. And now we'll call this number 2 navy. And we're going to drag this underneath the white base. So now we got the navy all taken care of. Let's do our red next. We'll go to select color range. And let's see if we can't find our red here. Let's use our white mask here, and then I'm going to bump this up to about 100. See what we got here. We'll zoom in a little bit. Again, going back to this little piece here, we do want to include some of that. So let's hit deselect and give that another shot. Select color range. We'll select our red and then our add selector here. And we'll add some of this red to it, and we'll pull it back just a little bit to get rid of some of those blue elements. Let's give that a try, and we'll hit OK. We'll see where we're at. So that looks pretty good to me. So now we're going to make a new channel right here with our mask, and then we're going to hit Command D to deselect that. Select our layer, Command I to inverse it. So now we have our red ready to go. We'll call this number 3. We'll just call it red. We'll move that right underneath the navy. We have our yellow to do. So we'll do our yellow next. We'll go to select color range. Same process. I think I'll bump this up to 100 and hit OK. So that looks pretty good. We are going to put a little bit of a spread on it, and we'll go to select, modify, expand, and we'll do it by 1. So now we have our spread on it, and we're going to create our new mask here. Hit Command D, and then we are going to inverse this, and then we'll call it number 4 yellow. And one of the reasons, not only because this is going to be the print order, but if you just called it yellow and then brought it into Adobe Illustrator, it will not recognize as a spot color because it has yellow in there for CMYK process. So we got our yellow created, and sometimes it's easy to forget after you've done some steps to miss doing your spread. With our red, we did miss it, so we're just going to hold Command down and hold it over red. That will pull up our selection, and we just clicked right inside this thumbnail. We need to inverse this, so I'm going to hit Command I, and then we'll do select, modify, expand, and we'll do that by 1. Hit D on the keyboard. Now we're going to fill it with black this time, so we're going to hold Command, or you could use Control if you're on a PC, and hit delete. So now we have our spread for our red ready to go. We're going to hit Command D, deselect that. If we double click on our zoom glass, we can still see that everything is nice and crisp. It's not too pixelated. Now at this point, we're getting pretty close. Now that we have all of our colors created here, we put our spread on our red and our yellow. Now it's time to assign some spot colors. So I'm going to double click on our white base, and I'm going to just use our color picker here to select white, and we're going to make this 100%, and we're going to make it a spot color and hit OK. And I'm going to go down the line and choose some spot colors, and it kind of really doesn't matter too much in this kind of situation how close the colors are, but we're going to get them pretty close. This looks like a good navy to me. We're going to make that 100%. Make sure spot color is selected. We're going to hit OK. Red, this is a pretty decent red as is. We're going to make that 100. And spot color, we're going to hit OK. Same thing with our yellow. I'm going to come down here, turn that to 0. I'm going to hit OK. We're going to make this 100%. Select spot color and hit OK. And now you'll notice that because it is designated as yellow, it did change it to yellow and removed our number 4. So we need to go back in there and add our number 4. And then last but not least, our white top. And we're going to select some white here, spot color, and we're going to make this 100%. Now we have our spot colors assigned. One of the ways you can kind of go about double checking that is you can just create a new layer here, and we'll just call this shirt color. And we'll move it up above the white base. We'll double click on it, make it a spot color, and we'll get a color that's pretty close to the blue of the shirt. We'll hit OK. Make that 100%. And we're going to end up deleting that. By the way, we'll turn everything on here. And so now you can see we got our shirt color. We can actually see our red overlaying on top of our white. So if we zoom in, we can see our red, that we got a little bit of a spread on it. So it's looking pretty good to me. I'd be happy with sending this off the print film. And you know, you can see here that I probably went a little dark with my blue, but you know, whatever ink color you use on press that's going to be how it comes out, right? So let's go ahead and delete our shirt color. We're going to hit yes. We're going to go ahead and save this as a PSD. We'll just call this example 2, and we want to be sure to include our spot colors and include our layers, and we're just going to go ahead and save that. The other way you can go about saving this is once you got all of your colors taken care of, you're happy with it, you can go to image and duplicate this. We're going to hit OK. And then we are going to delete our RGB colors, and we're just going to get rid of those entirely, so that way we just have our spot colors. Now I'm going to hit Command Shift and S, and we're going to save that as a Photoshop DCS 2.0 with our spot colors, and that will save it out as an EPS with all those spot colors embedded into it. So we're going to just go ahead and hit save. We're going to hit OK, and then we can close all that out. Here's some cool art that Michelle's working on. We'll show you that later, guys. We're going to go over to Photoshop. We're going to go over to Adobe Illustrator, and I'm going to grab my template. By the way, we have a link down in the description where you can grab our t-shirt registration template for 10 bucks. It's ready to go, no fuss. You won't have to spend time creating your own. And as we open up this template file, it's going to create a new document, and you don't ever have to worry about saving over your file or having to recreate something over and over. So now we're on our art layer here. And I'm going to hold Command Shift and P for place, and we're going to go to our desktop, and I'm going to show you these 2 different examples bringing it to Adobe Illustrator. So we'll start off with the PSD. They both will end up bringing in all the spot colors, and I'll show you the difference between the 2 really. So here's our artwork. We could just go ahead and take this and center align it to our artboard and bring up our center and registration marks. That way we're not having to do a longer print stroke than necessary to get our registration marks down to do our registration. So now at this point I can hit Command P and go to print. But with the PSD, because it is showing this representation here on output, we would just have to make sure that cyan, magenta, yellow, and black are turned off. We're only printing our spot colors. Now I'm going to hit Command Shift P. Now we're going to place our DCS2 file, which is the EPS. We're going to place that down. And in this case, it's going to bring in our spot colors. However, we don't have the same representation, right? But the caveat to that, if I go to Command P, the print and output, it's not going to include the cyan, magenta, and yellow in it. So you can't accidentally just print those colors and like, oh my God, I'm printing these unnecessary colors and just wasted a bunch of film. So boys and girls, this is ready to go. Now I'm going to go ahead and print some film. I'll show you how everything comes out. This place really does accumulate a lot of dust. Doesn't it, Shannon?
Yeah.
Our films are all ready to go. This actually isn't for us. We're going to send these out. So if you need separation and film services, give us a holler. We'll leave our contact information down in the description. So there you go. I hope this tutorial was very helpful, so that way you can just refine your skills using Adobe Photoshop, doing your separations. Don't forget that we do have a link down in the description for Adobe Photoshop that will kick a little bit of a commission our way. It doesn't cost you any extra, any more than if you were just to go over to adobe.com and get your subscription that way. It just helps us continue to make videos such as these. Until next time, guys, we will see you later.